Alright everyone, we've hit Friday. Celtic are back on Sunday. That's now less than 2 days away. Livingston we are playing. We've got a couple of videos on the channel between now and kick-off. Tomorrow we're going to do the proper preview for the game. Predicted 11, Ange quotes, maybe even an opposition report as well. It's all going to be packed into tomorrow's video. Today though, we've got a bit of a roundup for you. Some interesting stories, I think. Maybe some stories that we wouldn't normally cover on the channel, but ones to kind of get you thinking and hopefully talking as well. So Sunday is our 9th and final game of a hectic October. In total, we have 5 to go now until the World Cup. If we can win our 4 league games there, basically the 4 that aren't against a team called Real Madrid, then we'll be a minimum of 4 points clear at the top of the Premiership going into the World Cup, which would be a pretty good result. It won't be easy though, starting with that opening game against Livingston on Sunday. But we're not talking about that today. We're doing the roundup. Just want to say, before I get started, we have had a few videos out on the channel since full time on Tuesday. And if you're looking to waste a little bit of time ahead of kick-off on Sunday, I would urge you to give them a go. We had the initial very raw reaction with me and John, me from outside Celtic Park, after the game on Tuesday. Then the following day we had my next day reaction, bringing in some of your comments as well, even the ones slagging me off. And then yesterday we had Scott McDonald back on the channel giving his thoughts on why it's not quite happened for us in the Champions League, and also why domestic football is crucial for us. It's always crucial for us, but especially in this wee period before the World Cup. So check that all out. What is happening right now? Well, there are a few interesting stories to cover today. The first one is fairly hypothetical at this stage, but interesting to ponder nonetheless. It's been, a good 18 months now since the collapse of the European Super League. You know, the one we had 11 major clubs and Tottenham Hotspur signing up for it. It was launched, branded as this new Champions League, effectively, but with no relegation. And then within, I think, 24 to 48 hours, it had collapsed completely. The 6 English clubs all pulled out amid fan pressure. Other teams in mainland Europe pulled out as well. But there are actually still 3 teams standing, adamant that the Super League is the way to go, despite UEFA's revised format of the Champions League from 2024. The clubs are our upcoming opponents next week, Real Madrid, and Europa League bound Juventus and Barcelona. And the latest report from John Cross at the Mirror suggests that Celtic and Rangers could be included in revised plans for the breakaway league. So yes, the 3 clubs that are still standing are still adamant that they are going the right way, and they're in the midst of a court case at the moment. English clubs are said to be out of the running now for the Super League, given the backlash from their supporters, and the rest of Europe is very much trying to catch up to the EPL with their billions and billions of pounds in TV contracts. And it is said by the Mirror that Celtic and Rangers, along with the likes of Ajax, could be invited along for the ride. So yeah, it seems a long way off. It is worth saying that Celtic's thoughts on the Super League have been made abundantly clear when all that drama happened 18 months ago. Our chief executive at the time, Peter Lawwell, was against the breakaway. It'd be interesting to see what Celtic's stance would be on it if we happen to be included in plans rather than excluded. Definite benefits there for Celtic in terms of our growth, the millions and millions of pounds, if not billions, that it would bring in over time to the club. But I think it's fair to say supporters would feel the same way if the Super League plans kind of emerged again. So it's pretty quiet now, apart from me talking about it, but I do sense that this is a story that's going to rear its head. Some would say its ugly head at some point in the future. So yeah, I mean, I always think it's interesting to talk about this kind of stuff. Maybe not the Super League. I'm not convinced there's ever going to be a Super League with Celtic included. I'm not even convinced there's ever really going to be a Super League, certainly not in the kind of format that they were talking about when they unveiled it a year and a half ago. But I think it is interesting to ponder this kind of stuff and look at where Celtic could be playing their football in, 10, 15, 20 years' time. I do still think that cross-border leagues could have a major part to play. There was a lot of chat about the so-called Beneliga, which was a merger effectively of Dutch football and Belgian football. I think they were talking about an 18-team league, 10 clubs from the Netherlands, 8 from Belgium, kind of bringing all the resources together to create another major European footballing league. Those plans were very real. Conversations took place. Some would say they were locked down in talks for a period of time before the Dutch side of the deal and the major clubs in the Netherlands pulled the plug. So the Beneliga isn't going to happen, but I do get the sense that cross-border leagues could still be an interesting thing in the future for us to keep an eye on. Equally, the other scenario, I think, is that European competition through UEFA is just going to grow and grow and grow. We've already covered extensively on the channel that from 2024, when the new Champions League and indeed the Europa League format comes in, that we're going to have more games than ever before. And I can see a very real possibility of that just increasing and increasing over time, possibly to the extent where you're playing more European fixtures than domestic fixtures. So if you're asking me, idiot dressed in yellow who doesn't have a clue about much, never mind looking into the future, what I think will happen, then I do see Celtic remaining in Scottish football to some extent, but I think as time goes on there's going to be more and more European football, the major clubs in Europe playing against each other. So we'll wait and see how that happens. I kind of hope that is the case. I think it's the best of both worlds. I don't think Celtic should ever be looking to leave Scotland. And I don't think there's any real evidence other than the occasional Dermot Desmond Athletic interview about moving down to England that Celtic are looking to leave Scotland. But equally, I think we're always looking to maximise our revenue. So I think best of both worlds, we stay in Scotland and get more European football, and indeed that is the way things are heading. Right, much more currently, and if you are still with us, thanks very much. Well, not actually currently, back in the past. Some nice comments from Shakhtar's boss Igor Jovićević, seen here darting into the media room on Monday in perhaps the shortest video ever, so short that I've had to slow it down. On Tuesday's game, he said, there really was an unprecedented atmosphere in Glasgow. We couldn't hear each other on the bench because of the noise. You rarely see such fanaticism, thank you, on fans these days. We are really a very young team. We have no experience when it comes to playing in such circumstances, and we reduce Celtic to 2 chances. They score 5 or 6 goals every week in the Scottish Championship, and they have their best team in the last 20 years. We could have won, but the point is phenomenal because it secured the Europa League in the spring. I have to say how good it was when we managed to calm down the Celtic fans with our game in Glasgow. It was a great feeling when we were keeping possession of the ball, and when we scored a goal, everything turned into silence, which gave us additional motivation. We all felt that's it. So some very nice comments there from the Shakhtar boss, who I think came across really well whenever we dealt, very respectful. Interesting as well, because I didn't actually think the atmosphere was particularly good on Tuesday. It was in spells. Start of the match was very loud. After we got the goal, the stadium was really rocking. The Yakamakis song was as loud as I've heard it. Amazing. So there were really good moments, but I just think in general, I touched on this yesterday with Scott, I think at the moment there's just such a kind of recognition amongst the Celtic support and a realisation of where we're at, and the fact that, more often than not, we don't get positive results now, even at home in the Champions League. And I think, if we can get back to making Celtic Park it's never going to be a fortress. I don't think we're ever going to get back to those amazing days of the early 21st century where we effectively beat everyone. But I think if we can get back to a respectable stage where, every season we can at least, win one game, hopefully two, ideally three in the group stage of the Champions League, and take the odd big scalp here and there, then I think the atmosphere will be much better. It's still probably the best in Europe. I mean, the noise before the game, "You'll never walk alone," is incredible. So it's easy to see why we get these comments from effectively every, manager or player who's asked, who visits the stadium. But it could be louder. And I think part of that is down to the team, getting results and inspiring that atmosphere as well. Yeah. So, glad I got that off my chest. Our hopes of lifting the Sydney Super Cup, of course, the first part of our quadruple this season. I've maybe taken a little bit of a knock, given the news yesterday that Scotland will play Turkey on Wednesday, the 16th of November, the day before Celtic's Sydney Super Cup opener against Sydney FC. Now, unless we've still got that Dyson Maida specific playing from February knocking about, it does seem likely that the Scottish Celtic contingent are only going to be playing one of those matches, and given that international football almost always takes precedence, again, see that Dyson Maida example from February, it seems very much that we could be without the likes of Taylor, Ralston, Turnbull, Forrest for at least that first game of the Sydney Super Cup. So not totally sure how the Sydney Super Cup is going to look from a Celtic point of view. Of course, the result isn't massively important. I think Ange is certainly going to want to go there and play well and win. In fact, he's said that already on a number of occasions. But personally, I'm just looking forward to being able to watch a Celtic game live while having my breakfast. I think that's going to be a very weird but enjoyable feeling. Elsewhere, Albion Ajeti has been speaking a bit to Football Scotland about his time at Celtic. He actually comes across quite well in the interview, talks a bit about why it didn't work out and how difficult a period it was at Celtic, but equally doesn't slag the club off. In fact, the very opposite, and I think the final kind of answer in the piece, he's very respectful to Celtic and the fact that he played for Celtic. Obviously still on our books as well. He's currently out on loan at Sturm Graz. They are almost certainly, I think, going to have European football after Christmas. They're actually looking good for Europa League knockout football after Christmas. So perhaps he's having the last laugh over Celtic, but good to hear him doing well at Sturm Graz. And yeah, things are just kind of ticking along. Another interesting weekend awaits. We go to Livingston on Sunday. Obviously, fixtures tomorrow in the Premiership as well. So we'll see how that goes. And from tomorrow, we will, of course, be building ahead to the big game at the Tony Macaroni. I will speak to you then.